today you will learn the top tech trend that will dominate 2024, and also you'll see where this trend is dangerous and where it's a huge opportunity. Welcome to the Tech for Non-Techies podcast. I'm your host, tech entrepreneur, executive coach, and Chicago-based MBA, Sophia Matveeva. My aim here is to help you have a great career in the digital age. In a time when even your coffee shop has an app, you simply have to speak tech. On this podcast, I share core technology concepts, help you relate them to business outcomes, and most importantly, share practical advice on what you can do to become a digital leader today. If you want to have a great career in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Hello, smart people. Happy New Year, my dears. What do you think? Shall we make 2024 our best year yet? I think let's give it a go. Why not? You only live once, so we might as well give it our best shot. So when we think about the year ahead, let us remember that we sadly do not have full control of our outcomes, but we do control our inputs. And in general, when we have thoughtful inputs, we're more likely to have the results that we want. I mean, you already know this with food, right? If you eat more greens and less sugar, you will feel and look better. That did not stop me from having a hot chocolate with whipped cream this morning, though. Anyway, it is the same with our brains and our actions. If we take time to educate ourselves, to learn how to tell real innovation from tech hype, we're more likely to become leaders in the digital age rather than followers. And this is why, my dear smart listener, in the next few episodes of the Tech for Non-Techies podcast, I'm going to share my predictions for what will happen in tech in 2024 so you can be best prepared for this year. Today's episode is the first one in my predictions mini-series, and today you will learn the top tech trend that will dominate 2024, and also you'll see where this trend is dangerous and where it's a huge opportunity. This way, you'll be able to make the smartest decisions for your career, for your venture, or for your investment strategy. And obviously, this is not investment advice, so please don't sue me. This is an educated opinion on what is on the horizon, so you can make the most of it. And, my dear smart person, in the name of controlling your inputs, I have a question for you. Have you registered for Design for Growth yet? Haha, this is the best way to start your 2024. Design for Growth is a workshop that will take place online on the 28th of January, and it consists of two main parts. So it's a kind of 2-for-1 situation. First, you will learn design thinking principles, which will be covered by me and a super cool lead designer. And then in the second part, we will use these principles to create a plan of actions for your best year yet. You can use the Design for Growth program to create a new product, to launch or grow a venture, or to transform your career. I've used design thinking for all three, and I can tell you that it works. As well as the actual workshop on the 28th, you will also get a class on how to get headhunted. The reason why I wanted to do this is that most jobs are not advertised. So if you really want 2024 to be the time when you change your career, sitting there and just applying for jobs on LinkedIn is not the best use of your time. You have to learn how to make opportunities come to you, which is what we're going to cover in this bonus session, which is going to take place in February. All of this, so the Design for Growth workshop and the How to Get Headhunted class, all of this is online. So essentially you can grow your network and learn new skills without leaving your house. You don't even have to put shoes on. There's also a bunch of bonuses that come with this program, and all of that is in the program description, which is at techfornontechies.co/events. And also you can get it in the show note. The Design for Growth program is only open to a really small group. So basically that means that everybody can get feedback and coaching and also make genuine new connections. So basically what I suggest you do is sign up to make sure that you get your space before they all fill up. And now, my dear smart person, let's start with prediction number 1 for 2024. My number one prediction is that large language models are going to continue rising in popularity. And this is especially the case for closed large language models. Now let's quickly define terms. A large language model uses natural language processing to understand and generate human-like text-based content in response. Okay, this might not make sense to you. Basically, it's AI for language, so this is why it's a large language model. It's not images or music. So there are AI uses where AI makes music or makes images. We're talking about large language models. This is a different area. It's about language. ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4 are examples of large language models before you do all of the plugins. DALL-E, which also comes from OpenAI, it uses AI to create images, and therefore it is not a large language model because image is not language. Got it? I'm really driving the point home here. DALL-E is still generative AI. Generative AI is artificial intelligence focused on creating models that make original content. And that content can be images, it can be music, or it can be language, so text. Generative AI models do this by processing lots and lots of training data and then using machine learning algorithms to basically see patterns. And then once they catch those patterns, they give you answers to your questions or they give you answers to your queries based on those patterns. LLMs, otherwise known as large language models, and generative AI are basically just different parts of technology. They're used interchangeably, but I know that, there are some A students here who want to get all of the definitions. So they're not exactly the same thing, but essentially the two of them, so LLMs plus generative AI, they get combined, these two technologies get combined to get the result that you would get in ChatGPT. If all of this went over your head, don't worry about it too much because this is not about learning definitions. This is about what you can do with this trend. I pasted a good article with clear explanations of LLMs versus generative AI in the show notes. But if you can't be bothered to read it, just for the purpose of today, remember, LLMs are about language only, because they have the word language in the title. I know, giving it away. And generative AI is about language and all sorts of other things, which includes language and images and music and so on. So my prediction for you today is specifically about large language models, and the one you probably know best is ChatGPT. Now listen to me. ChatGPT is wonderful, and I have already used it to save me lots of time. But LLMs do have their issues. And if you understand these issues, you will understand how large language models are going to develop in the future. One of the issues that LLMs have is that they hallucinate. This is when the tool literally makes up information. So some of you might already know the story when I ChatGPT'd myself. So I put into ChatGPT, and I think it was ChatGPT 3, who is Sofia Matveeva. And I got a bio of myself that sounded like it could be true, but it wasn't. So for example, it said that I work in a venture capital fund and that I have a book out with a famous publisher. And this is close to the truth because I advise venture capitalists and I used to work in a private equity fund. And also, I have written extensively for elite publications like the Harvard Business Review and the Financial Times. But this does not make me into a venture capitalist. I'm not a venture capitalist. I'm an educator and entrepreneur. And also, I do not have a book out yet. So the problem you see with generative AI is that this hallucination, it sounds true because it's not like ChatGPT said that I'm like, a figure skater and a SEAL trainer and a mother of 5. I don't know where that came from. That was my hallucination. So basically, I just want you to see that if you don't know what the actual facts are and you're just relying on large language models, you could get into trouble when you basically don't verify. And there have been some scandalous examples of this, like when there was a lawyer who basically just ChatGPT'd case history and didn't verify it and then presented all of these cases in an actual court case as precedent to a judge, and then it turned out that it was all made up by ChatGPT. The whole thing was a hallucination. And obviously the lawyer then got into trouble, lost the case, it was a disaster. This is why I want you to know that hallucination is a thing, because I do not want this to happen to you. Because in 2023, generative AI spread so quickly, the problems associated with it also spread quickly. And hallucination is one of these problems. Also, what I want you to know is that this hallucination thing, it's quite a hard technical issue to solve. And because of that, I suspect that yes, people are going to carry on trying to solve it from a technological point of view, But let's not hold out hope that it's going to completely stop doing it like tomorrow. That's probably not going to happen. So this is why in 2024, LLMs are going to continue rising in popularity, but we're going to have to learn that we need to verify everything that ChatGPT tells us. Think of it like, if you get, a really smart intern, maybe they're 16 or they're 18, you should give them tasks to do, but always check their work. Don't pass off their work as your own. Another issue with large language models is the data itself, and that's the data that goes into the model in the first place. So, for example, if you use AI to make a creative brief for a new advert, so let's imagine you're working in an advertising agency and you are told to come up with a new ad, for washing powder or whatever. And so basically you're using ChatGPT to come up with some ideas, and then it basically helps you write a script for a new ad. But the data that the AI uses is based on the original work of other creatives. And then you kind of have this script which is basically based on the work of other people. What's going to happen then? Are those creatives, are they going to claim that part of it is their copyright? Are they going to say that their copyright is being violated? Are they going to sue? And if they are going to sue, who are they going to sue? Are they going to sue the large language model? So are they going to sue OpenAI? Or are they going to sue the user? So basically the company that is using ChatGPT or whatever large language model to create the briefing. Now, I don't know, but in 2024, we're going to find out because we're in the early days of this debate, but it is happening. I've seen professional services firms and creative companies getting really worried about this issue, and honestly, for good reason. Actually, one of my clients is a lawyer, and this lawyer has deep knowledge of technology and artificial intelligence. And this lawyer is now exploring how to solve this issue of rights clearance in the digital world. So literally, I'm reporting to you from the front lines of the AI legal battle, and we are only seeing the beginning of this battle. So what this means is that smart companies with deep pockets, they don't want to get sued. And as a result, what I'm seeing is that these companies are now investing in their own closed large language models. And now let's continue with our terms. A closed large language model, which I think is going to be one of the hottest trends of 2024. A closed large language model is basically a system that is trained on the data set that you feed into it rather than the entire internet as a whole. So for example, if you're a huge, old, established law firm, you're going to have information on all of the cases that you've been involved in, so the cases that you've lost, the cases that you won, all of these cases, and you are going to know that all of that information is absolutely correct because basically you created it, you were involved. So you could use that information to feed into the model, and also you can get other public record data that you have approved for your model. This way, it's not going to be a legal blog by anybody that's going to end up feeding into your model. And I've seen law firms and advertising companies working on this already, which makes sense because they've got the data, they've got the money, and they've got the incentive. And the incentive, one of the incentives is that their people are really expensive and their growth is constrained by the human element. And this is as true of an advertising company as in a law firm because, even corporate lawyers, I have heard, need to sleep sometimes. Although, given the time that they email me, I'm kind of doubting that. So anyway, imagine you are a partner in a law firm or you are the CEO of an advertising company. You're going to be really, really interested in basically maximizing your profit and getting as much as you can out of the hours that your very expensive people are working. So you are going to be interested in making their time more productive with a verified version of a ChatGPT-like thing. This is why the closed large language model is going to disrupt professional services and creative industries first. But don't go crazy because AI is not going to replace lawyers, it is not going to replace advertising creatives, and it is not going to replace doctors. What is going to happen instead is that these professions are going to be seriously shaken up by large language models and specifically closed large language models. And there are going to be some firms that basically just kind of ignore it and hope it goes away because they can't be bothered to learn. And there are going to be other companies that actually are going to make AI work for it rather than ignoring it. Now, what history shows us is that the people who actually embrace new technologies tend to be the ones that survive and do really well. Now, you might be saying to me, well, I'm not a lawyer and I don't work in an advertising firm, so why do I care? Well, I want you to know about this because both as a business leader and a customer, you have probably hired a lawyer before. You might have hired an accountant. You might have hired an advertising agency. So you don't want a lawyer who doesn't ever use LLMs because basically your legal costs are going to be higher than they need to be. But equally, you also don't want a lawyer who uses LLMs without understanding the limitations of the tool, because basically you could get into serious trouble. So literally, if you are going to be hiring creatives or if you're going to be hiring professional services companies, it does make sense to ask them what their policy is or how they are using large language models. And the trend that I'm seeing in 2024 and also frankly beyond is that more and more traditional professions like lawyers and ad creatives and accountants are going to be more and more closely involved with technologists. And that means that even those who least expect it, divorce lawyers, they are going to have to learn to speak tech. And as I always tell you here, speaking tech is much easier than doing tech. Speaking tech does not require you to take a coding course. I know this is delightful news for many of you. And while I know that some people actually really love coding in their spare time, I suspect that most of the people who listen to me are not in that category. In my experience, even a one-day workshop on tech for business leaders can make you feel more confident in collaborating with technologists and speaking to their tech clients. And this is why in 2024, if you want to upskill your organization for the digital age, I really suggest that you book one of our Tech for Non-Techies trainings. Because AI won't take jobs. AI is not going to replace lawyers. It is not going to replace accountants. But it will be people who know how to work with AI who will take the jobs. So it's not technology replacing people. It's people who know how to collaborate and use technology who are going to replace the people who don't. So we have a lot of change ahead, which means a lot of opportunity. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously the kind of person who wants to focus on the opportunity of AI and not pretend that it's not happening. So now I've got some practical tips for you on steps that you can take to make the most of the LLM opportunity as a user, as a corporate leader, or as an investor. Let's start with users because that's basically all of us. First, you need to understand what large language models are, and you need to know where the data that's fed into them comes from. So, are you using a closed LLM or are you using an open public LLM? What are the implications of that? Also, I really just want you to remember that hallucination point. Because once you know about hallucination, you're just aware of it, you know that you need to check the facts that the model gives you because those facts could actually be completely made up. So for 2024, I suggest you spend some time learning to use ChatGPT or another LLM because there will be times when you're completely amazed by what it can do, and there will be other times when you're really frustrated and disappointed. And when you get that experience, you'll really be able to see, okay, this is what it's good at, these are the limitations, this is how I can use this trend for myself. Now, my practical tips for corporate leaders. Have you thought about your AI policy in your company? Do you have one? The thing is, whether you have one or not, there is somebody in your company who is already using large language models like ChatGPT to do their job. And this could mean copyright infringement, for example. This could also mean that they might be falling for model hallucination, and they might not know about it because they haven't listened to this podcast episode. And so, please know that I'm not saying don't use these models. I'm saying do use these models. You definitely should use these models. But you need to have a smart policy for how these models should be used and how whatever information they give you should be verified. And please don't think that you're like, oh, okay, we need a policy. Let's just tell the HR people to do it. Please, for the love of God, do not do this. The LLM revolution is serious, so please take it seriously and get somebody who actually knows what they're talking about to help you design this policy. So for example, get in touch with Tech for Non-Techies. I would love to help you. Also, another point for the corporate leaders here, what is your plan for closed large language models? Are you going to develop one yourself? Are you going to use one that's developed for the industry? Because there are services popping up for specific industries that are based on training data specifically in that industry. So, for example, I've seen them happening in law and in accounting, and I expect that more and more will pop up in 2024, which I think is fabulous news. But then the question is, okay, you're probably going to want to use one of these, but do you know how to get the right provider? Do you know how to ask them the right questions when you've got different providers pitching to you? Because it's not about you designing the model yourself, but you need to understand how it's built, what goes into it, so then you can make the right choice for you. And now is my tip for investors. I want you to know that on the startup side of things, it looks like we are reaching an AI valuation bubble. And the reason I'm saying this is I have seen tech hype before about other things like crypto and the metaverse and NFTs. And now it looks like we are in the midst of AI mania. But unlike crypto and the metaverse, there are wide-scale applications for generative AI and large language models. And, I'm actually paying for ChatGPT 4. So there is definitely revenue going into these things. But if you're an investor, you know that revenue is not the same as a valuation. And what happens to valuations in a bubble? Well, they go sky high and then they burst. So if you're looking at AI companies to invest in, just be smart about it. Obviously, AI, generative AI, large language models, they're here to stay. They are changing the world. And the AI revolution, it's not just going to be about 2024, it's going to continue for decades. So in general, the sector is an investment opportunity. But in order to make smart investments, you need to look at the fundamentals. Find your inner Warren Buffett, not the 18-year-old crypto trader in a basement. If you do not understand why somebody would pay for a tool, then don't invest in it. And I know that Tech Non-Techies listeners are clever and they are discerning. You do not fall for hype. You use your brain to make decisions. And this is why I love you. This is why we get on so well. Okay, my dear smart person, this is it for this week's lesson. Tune in next week for my next prediction for 2024 and how you can make the most of that tech prediction for your career, your organization, or your investment. And you know what? If you're finding these episodes useful, would you like to let me know? I would like that. Leave this podcast a rating and a review as your New Year gift to me. I would really love to hear from you. And also remember to sign up for Design for Growth, which is taking place in just a couple of weeks. It was honestly going to be a great way to start your year in the strongest way possible. And Benjamin Franklin agrees with me. He said, an investment in education pays the best dividend. So invest in your education today and join Design for Growth. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or just go to techfornontechies.co/events and see the information there. Thank you very much for listening, my very clever listener. I adore you. Have a wonderful day, and I shall be back in your delightful smart ears next week. Ciao.